The second alarm cut through the pump house like metal scraping glass. Ethan turned sharply toward the control wall. The red warning light flashed across his face in hard bursts. Outside, one of the workers shouted something I could not hear over the rain. Then came another sound. Water rushing too fast through the lower channel. I grabbed the radio from the shelf beside the panel. Ethan stepped in front of me before I could lift it. Naomi. His voice stayed calm, but his jaw tightened. This does not need to become a scene. I looked past him through the rain-streaked window. The excavator had sunk one tire into the muddy edge beside the south drain. Too much pressure on unstable ground. Brilliant. One more foot and the retaining pipe would crack. Then the entire lower road would flood before sunrise. The men outside finally started looking nervous. They should have been. Move, I said. Ethan did not. The pump timer clicked again. Slow. Steady. Old machinery always sounded tired before disaster. The room smelled stronger now. Wet metal. Salt. Electrical heat. My father used to say you could smell bad decisions before you saw them. Tonight proved him right. Ethan lowered his voice. You are holding up a $7 million expansion. You are standing on a 70-year-old flood system. That landed. Barely. His eyes flicked toward the warning panel again. Good. Let him finally understand this was not a clubhouse argument between rich neighbors. This entire peninsula sat 2 feet above marsh level during storm season. Every mansion uphill depended on the pumps beneath my boots. Every dock. Every basement wine cellar. Every polished marble kitchen. They loved pretending the marsh did not exist. Until hurricane season arrived. Another worker ran toward the door. His reflective jacket flashed through the rain. Sir, he called breathlessly. The pressure gauge outside is climbing. Ethan did not answer him immediately. He kept looking at me instead. Like he was trying to solve a problem that refused to stay simple. How bad, he finally asked. I do not know yet, the worker admitted. But the south line sounds rough. Rough. That was a polite way of saying the pipe was screaming underground. I reached for the radio again. Ethan hesitated this time. Just enough. I took it from the shelf. Control Station 3, I said into the static. Shut down south feeder access now. Silence crackled back. Then an older voice answered. Naomi? Now, Frank. A pause. Then the heavy clunk of remote gates locking echoed faintly outside through the storm. Ethan looked toward the Marina Road. His crew truck sat directly behind the barrier gate. Trapped. One of the workers swore loudly. You locked us in? Ethan asked. I locked the flood channel. His stare hardened. For a second, I thought he would argue again. Instead, he exhaled slowly through his nose and rubbed rainwater from his sleeve. That surprised me more than shouting would have. Most rich men around Whitmore Point hated resistance. Ethan looked tired instead. Tired in the bones. Tired in the eyes. Like somebody who had spent years winning arguments and still sleeping badly afterward. The lights flickered overhead. Once. Twice. Then steadied. Everyone froze. Even the rain sounded quieter for half a breath. Tell your operator to stop digging, I said. Now. Ethan glanced outside again. The excavator bucket had stopped moving. But the machine still idled beside the drain line. Too heavy. Too close. The worker near the ditch suddenly waved both arms. Another shout. Sharper this time. Then muddy water burst upward beside the excavator tire in a violent spray. Not a break yet. But close enough. Every face outside changed at once. Panic always arrived late in places like this. Ethan stepped toward the window. Jesus. I grabbed my raincoat from the hook by the door. If that line ruptures, I said, your entire lower marina goes underwater before dawn. Ethan finally looked at me like someone standing near the edge of a cliff. Then the main power dipped again. The lights dimmed hard enough to turn every face gray for a second. Somewhere beneath the floor, the old generators kicked awake with a deep mechanical groan. Ethan looked up at the ceiling automatically. Rich people always noticed power after it disappeared. Rain hammered the marina roof in uneven bursts now. Wind shoved against the pump house walls hard enough to rattle the metal shelves beside me. One of the workers rushed through the doorway, soaked to the skin. Sir, water is backing into the lower parking lot. Ethan swore quietly under his breath. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just tired. The kind of curse people used when problems stopped feeling expensive and started feeling real. I pulled my hood over my head and stepped toward the door. Ethan caught my arm this time without thinking. Warm hand. Tight grip. Where are you going? To save your marina. His fingers loosened immediately. Good. He still understood leverage when it mattered. Outside, cold rain slapped against my face. The dock lights shimmered across black water like broken glass. Mud sucked at my boots as I crossed toward the south drain. The excavator operator climbed down from the cab the second he saw me coming. Smart man. The machine sat tilted near the retaining pipe, its heavy tread buried deep into the soaked ground. Water hissed from a crack beside the concrete wall. Not ruptured yet. But close. Very close. Ethan followed several feet behind me. No umbrella. No assistants holding flashlights over his shoulders now. Just rain soaking through his expensive coat while he stared at the rising water around his shoes. One of the workers pointed toward the ditch. Pressure keeps climbing. I crouched near the valve housing. Rust streaked the old steel bolts. My father replaced half this line after Hurricane Irene. The HOA rejected funding twice before the storm hit. Funny how wealthy people loved seawater views until seawater entered their garages. I wiped rain from my eyes and listened carefully. Pipes talked if you knew how to hear them. Tonight the vibration sounded wrong. Uneven. Sharp. The feeder valve is stuck, I said. Ethan stepped closer. Can you shut it down? Not from here. The worker beside us shifted nervously. Then what? I looked toward the old service tunnel beneath the marina office. Dark opening. Floodwater already swirling near the entrance grate. Ethan followed my eyes. Absolutely not. That valve controls the overflow pressure. You are not going down there alone. I almost laughed. At that. Almost. 5 minutes ago this man arrived with demolition notices and bolt cutters. Now his voice carried something else. Not softness exactly. Concern felt too dangerous for someone like Ethan Whitmore. But it was there. Small. Real. The wind shifted sharply across the water. Somewhere farther down the docks, a boat alarm started screaming into the night. Another light flickered out near the south slips. Then another. The workers exchanged nervous looks. One of them whispered about calling emergency management. Ethan rubbed rainwater from his face and turned toward me again. How long before the line fails? Maybe 20 minutes. Nobody spoke after that. The storm answered for us instead. Water slapped harder against the retaining wall. The marina groaned beneath the tide. In the distance, thunder rolled low over the bay like furniture dragging across the sky. Ethan stared toward the tunnel entrance. His jaw flexed once. Decision settling in. Men like him hated situations they could not purchase their way out of. Tonight required something different. "What do you need?" he finally asked. I blinked at him once. Not because of the question. Because of how quickly he asked it. No speech. No ego. Just rain dripping from his hair while billion-dollar confidence slowly gave way to survival instinct. "Flashlight," I said. "And somebody to hold the upper hatch open." Ethan took the flashlight directly from one of the workers before the man could answer. "I will do it." The worker looked shocked. Honestly, so was I. Ethan stepped toward the flooded tunnel entrance beside me. Water rushed dark and cold beneath the grate. The smell rising from below carried oil, salt, and old storm runoff. Bad combination. I reached for the hatch wheel. Ethan looked at me carefully through the rain. Then his voice dropped low enough that only I heard it. "You really would risk yourself for all these people?" I twisted the rusted wheel until the hatch lock snapped free. "Somebody has to." Then the tunnel lights below suddenly went black. Darkness swallowed the tunnel so completely that even the storm outside felt far away for a second. Cold air rolled upward from the hatch. Opening. It smelled like seawater trapped inside old concrete. Ethan angled the flashlight downward, but the beam barely cut through the black below. Water moved somewhere underneath us with a low rushing growl. "Backup lights should have kicked on," I said quietly. "Should have," one of the workers repeated behind us. I ignored him. Panic spread fast in tight spaces. Especially around rich men who had never stood ankle-deep in floodwater before midnight. I climbed down the metal ladder first. Rust pressed cold through my gloves. Water dripped steadily from the tunnel ceiling onto my hood and shoulders. Ethan stayed above for half a second longer than I expected. Then his shoes hit the ladder behind me. Another surprise. Most people around Whitmore Point preferred giving orders from dry ground. The flashlight beam shook slightly as he climbed. Not fear exactly. Adrenaline. The tunnel floor sat under 6 inches of dark water when I reached the bottom. Freezing cold instantly soaked through my boots. The narrow concrete walls echoed every sound twice. Water. Breathing. Distant thunder. Somewhere deeper inside the system, pressure hammered unevenly through the pipes. I knew that sound too well. Ethan stepped off the ladder beside me and looked around slowly. "How old is this place?" "Built in 1958. "Still operational?" "Barely." The flashlight passed across faded markings on the wall. "Emergency flood controls. Drain sectors. Old county maintenance stamps almost erased by salt and time. My father used to bring me here during storms when I was little. He called the tunnels the hidden heartbeat of the marina. Nobody respected the system until the water started climbing their front steps." Ethan swept the light farther ahead. The tunnel narrowed around a sharp bend where the overflow valve chamber sat another 100 feet inside. Water rushed louder there. Faster. "You grew up doing this?" he asked. "I grew up fixing what wealthy people ignored." That shut him up for several steps. Water splashed softly around our legs as we moved deeper into the tunnel. The flashlight caught floating debris drifting past us. Leaves. Mud. Pieces of broken reeds washed in from the marsh. The storm outside kept feeding pressure into the system. Another loud metallic bang echoed somewhere ahead. Ethan stopped instantly. What was that? Probably the valve housing. Probably. I looked at him over my shoulder. You really hate uncertainty. I hate avoidable disasters. Then your crew should not have touched the south line. Silence again. Heavy this time. The tunnel ceiling dipped lower near the next chamber. Ethan nearly hit his head on a rusted support beam before ducking at the last second. His coat sleeve brushed dirty water along the wall. He looked down at it but did not complain. Interesting. The farther we walked from the marina lights, the less Ethan Whitmore looked like the polished HOA president from glossy neighborhood magazines. Down here he just looked exhausted. Human. Another alarm siren wailed faintly above us through the concrete ceiling. Distant but sharp enough to tighten my chest. Water pressure had climbed again. We rounded the bend. The valve chamber finally came into view. And my stomach dropped immediately. The entire overflow wheel was half submerged already. Water blasted from the side seam in violent sprays. One of the support brackets had cracked loose from the concrete base. Ethan lifted the flashlight higher. That does not look good. No, I admitted softly. It does not. The chamber walls trembled with every surge pushing through the system. The old wheel valve groaned like something alive under strain. If the bracket failed completely, the pressure release would jam shut. Then the south line would rupture for real. Ethan stared at the damaged bracket for several long seconds. Can it be repaired? Temporarily. How temporary? Depends how lucky we are. Another hard shudder rolled through the pipes beneath our feet. Water splashed violently against the chamber walls. Ethan steadied himself against the railing beside me. His hand landed inches from mine. Warm skin against freezing steel. Strange thing to notice during a flood emergency. Stranger that I noticed at all. Then the flashlight beam caught fresh scrape marks across the broken bracket. Deep metal gouges. Too clean. Too recent. I stepped closer instantly. Wait. Ethan angled the light downward. The scrape marks curved sharply across the steel support. Excavator teeth. Fresh damage. His crew did not almost cause this tonight. They already had. For 3 full seconds, Ethan said nothing. Water hammered through the damaged valve beside us while the flashlight beam stayed fixed on the scrape marks across the bracket. Fresh steel cuts. Deep enough to weaken the support before tonight ever started. I stepped closer until freezing water splashed against my knees. The gouges curved downward in a jagged arc. Excavator teeth. No question. Somebody hit this line earlier and walked away from it. Ethan finally exhaled slowly. My crew reported surface grading only. Your crew lied. His jaw tightened hard enough to show beneath the flashlight glow. Above us, thunder rolled again through the concrete like distant artillery. The tunnel vibrated with another pressure surge. Water burst violently from the cracked seam beside the valve wheel and sprayed across Ethan's coat. He did not even react. His attention stayed on the damaged steel. Good. Because this was no longer about permits or HOA politics. Somebody had nearly destroyed the flood system beneath an entire marina. I crouched beside the support housing and reached into the icy water carefully. The lower bolts had shifted loose from the concrete base. If the bracket slipped another inch, the pressure wheel would jam permanently. Ethan swept the flashlight lower. Tell me what to do. I looked up at him sharply. Men like Ethan Whitmore usually preferred commanding disasters. Not taking instructions inside them. But his voice carried no arrogance now. Just urgency. There should be a manual lock bar behind the valve housing, I said. Steel handle about 3 feet long. Ethan immediately moved toward the rear wall without another word. The flashlight beam bounced across pipes and dripping concrete until it caught a long rusted metal bar hanging from old brackets. This? Yes. He pulled it loose with both hands. Metal shrieked against the wall. Another tremor rolled through the chamber beneath our feet. The pressure gauge above the valve jumped sharply into the red zone. Ethan saw it too. How much time? Less than before. Water climbed another inch around our boots. Cold enough to ache now. I shoved my shoulder against the damaged support bracket while Ethan handed me the lock bar. The steel felt slick with rust and seawater. When I say push, I told him, you force the wheel clockwise. Ethan nodded once. Rainwater dripped steadily from his hair onto his collar. The expensive businessman image had disappeared completely down here. No polished speeches. No controlled smile. Just soaked clothes and tense breathing inside an old flood tunnel. Funny how quickly survival stripped people back to truth. I wedged the lock bar beneath the cracked support and braced my boots against the concrete floor. Pain shot through my shoulder immediately. The bracket shifted half an inch. The valve screamed. Ethan grabbed the wheel with both hands. Now, I said. He pushed hard. Nothing moved. The wheel groaned against years of corrosion. Water exploded from the side seam in another violent burst. Ethan gritted his teeth and shoved again. Muscles tightened beneath his soaked shirt. The wheel jerked slightly this time. Progress. Barely. Again. He pushed harder. Metal shrieked through the chamber loud enough to hurt my ears. Then suddenly the valve rotated several inches with a heavy grinding snap. Water pressure changed instantly. The violent spray weakened into uneven bursts instead of solid force. I nearly collapsed forward from the sudden shift. Ethan caught my arm before I slipped into the water. Strong grip. Fast reflexes. His hand stayed there half a second longer than necessary. Then another sound cut through the chamber. A loud electronic chirp from Ethan's coat pocket. His phone. He ignored it at first. The pressure gauge slowly dropped out of the red zone above us. Good. Not safe yet. But stable enough to breathe. The phone chirped again. Relentless. Ethan finally pulled it free with obvious irritation. The bright screen lit his face pale blue in the dark tunnel. His expression changed instantly. Not anger. Worse. Recognition. I caught the name on the screen before he tilted it away. Vanessa Hale. The Vice President of the HOA Board. The same woman who pushed hardest for tearing down my father's pump house last year. Ethan stared at the phone for one long second before answering. What? His voice went cold again. Controlled. Dangerous. A woman's voice exploded faintly through the speaker loud enough for even me to hear over the water. The county inspector just arrived at the marina. Ethan's eyes lifted slowly toward mine. Then Vanessa said the next sentence. And he wants to know why your crew damaged protected infrastructure. Ethan lowered the phone slowly but did not hang up. Water dripped from his sleeve in steady taps against the flooded concrete floor. The flashlight beam trembled slightly in his other hand. Not fear this time. Calculation. Vanessa kept talking through the speaker. Fast. Sharp. Panicked. The inspector already saw the excavator tracks near the protected line, she said. He is asking questions about unauthorized access. Ethan rubbed one hand across his mouth. Did you tell him anything? Of course not. Too quick. Even I heard that. Ethan heard it too. His eyes narrowed faintly in the dim tunnel light. Above us, another deep rumble shook dust loose from the ceiling pipes. Storm pressure kept building outside. The valve chamber groaned again beside us. We stabilized the overflow wheel, but the system still sounded sick. Temporary fixes always carried tension inside them. Like holding cracked glass together with bare hands. Ethan finally lifted the phone again. Freeze all excavation activity immediately, he said coldly. Nobody touches another line tonight. Vanessa started protesting at once. Ethan, if the county freezes the expansion permit now, investors will panic. I said stop the work. Silence crackled through the speaker. Then her voice lowered carefully. You are letting that woman control this situation. That landed harder than she realized. I saw it in Ethan's face instantly. Tiny shift in the jaw. tightening around the eyes. Rich neighborhoods always used the same language when talking about women like me. That woman. Never expert. Never operator. Never the person keeping their houses above water during storms. Ethan looked toward me slowly. Water hissed through the pipes between us. She is preventing your marina from flooding, he said quietly into the phone. Vanessa laughed once. Short. Mean. You really believe she cares about this place? Ethan ended the call without answering. The tunnel went silent again except for the rush of water around our boots. He slipped the phone back into his coat pocket with controlled movements. Too controlled. Like he was trying not to think too hard about what he just heard. I turned back toward the pressure wheel. The valve still needs reinforcement. Ethan exhaled slowly. Can it hold until morning? Maybe. He almost smiled at that. Not amusement. Exhaustion. You really hate giving reassuring answers. Because storms do not care about reassurance. Another metallic shudder rolled through the chamber. Smaller this time. But enough to remind both of us how fragile the system still was. Ethan crouched beside the damaged bracket and studied the broken steel carefully. His flashlight illuminated the excavator gouges again. Fresh silver cuts against old rust. Vanessa approved tonight's contractor schedule, he said quietly. I looked at him. You think she knew? I think she only cares about deadlines. He rubbed water from the back of his neck. And investors. There it was. The first honest crack in the perfect Whitmore Point image. HOA meetings always looked polished above ground. Smiling board members. Expensive wine. Coastal preservation speeches. Meanwhile the infrastructure underneath them rotted quietly for decades. Ethan stared toward the flooded tunnel behind us. How long have you been maintaining this place alone? Since my father got sick. Nobody from the county helps. I laughed softly under my breath. The county barely remembers these tunnels exist. He absorbed that in silence. Somewhere farther back in the system, another alarm beeped twice before stopping abruptly. Not good. I reached for the wall radio mounted beside the chamber. Static hissed loudly before Frank's voice finally pushed through. Naomi? Status. Lower parking lot is flooding ankle deep now. Emergency crews are asking questions. Ethan stood. Immediately. How bad? Frank hesitated. Depends whether the tide keeps rising. Outside the tunnel, wind howled faintly through the ventilation shafts overhead. The storm had shifted direction. Worst timing possible. I pressed 2 fingers against my forehead briefly. Thinking. Calculating flow pressure. Backup routes. Failure points. Ethan watched me carefully without interrupting. There is another release gate near the East Marina, I said finally. If we open it manually, we might reduce enough pressure to save the south line. Might? You really love that word tonight. He almost smiled again. Smaller this time. Realer. Then his expression faded as another hard vibration shook the chamber beneath us. Water splashed violently against the concrete wall beside the damaged bracket. Ethan grabbed the railing instinctively. I looked toward the ceiling pipes. The pressure was climbing again. Fast. Frank's voice crackled sharply through the radio. Naomi, the county inspector wants access to the control records. Ethan's face darkened immediately. Then Frank added one more sentence. And Vanessa just arrived with lawyers. The second Frank mentioned lawyers, Ethan closed his eyes for half a breath. Not frustration. Recognition. Like he already knew exactly how this night would turn ugly above ground. Water dripped steadily from the tunnel ceiling onto the back of his coat. The flashlight beam rested against the damaged valve wheel now, pale and shaking across rusted steel. I took the radio from the wall mount again. Do not give anybody access to the records, I told Frank. Not until I get upstairs. Frank hesitated. County says they have authority. County also ignored maintenance requests for 12 years. Silence crackled through the speaker. Then Frank answered quietly. Understood. The radio clicked dead. Ethan watched me carefully. You keep records going back that far? Every repair. Every inspection request. Every rejected funding proposal. His expression shifted again. Tiny movement. But enough. People like Ethan spent their whole lives surrounded by polished summaries prepared by assistants and lawyers. Meanwhile, people like me lived inside the actual systems falling apart underneath those reports. Another sharp groan rolled through the tunnel walls. The pressure will jerked violently once before settling again. Temporary stability. Nothing more. Ethan looked toward the eastern side tunnel. You mentioned another release gate. East Marina overflow. Can we reach it from here? Yes. I grabbed the flashlight from his hand before he could answer. Our fingers brushed briefly in the dark. Warm skin. Cold tunnel air. The contact lasted less than a second but still landed strangely somewhere beneath my ribs. I hated noticing things like that during emergencies. Come on, I said. The east tunnel narrowed fast. Older construction. Lower ceiling. Pipes crowded overhead thick as tree trunks. Water sloshed louder around our boots now because the floor dipped toward the bay side release channels. Ethan stayed close behind me without complaining once. No speeches. No orders. Just steady footsteps through freezing water. The storm above us sounded heavier now through the ventilation grates. Wind moaned down the shafts in long hollow bursts. Somewhere nearby, loose metal clanged rhythmically against concrete. Why keep fighting for this place? Ethan asked suddenly behind me. I kept walking. Because people live here. Most people here treat you terribly. That almost made me stop. Almost. Floodwater does not care who voted against me at HOA meetings. Silence followed that. Heavy but thoughtful. Ethan stepped over a broken pipe bracket beside the wall. Vanessa thinks you are trying to block the expansion project permanently. Vanessa thinks poor people should disappear quietly. My flashlight swept across another faded county sign bolted crooked against the tunnel wall. East Overflow Control, authorized personnel only. The paint had nearly peeled away completely. Ethan read it as we passed. How much of this system did your father build? Enough to keep rich homes dry for 40 years. Another sharp vibration rattled through the pipes overhead. This one stronger. Water splashed against the tunnel walls hard enough to hit our knees. Ethan steadied himself against the concrete beside me. His breathing changed slightly after that. Faster now. Controlled but tighter. He finally understood how close the entire marina sat to failure tonight. We reached the east overflow chamber 3 minutes later. Smaller room. Older equipment. The emergency will sat above chest height beside a rusted manual chain release. Bad sign immediately. The chain hung crooked. One side snapped loose already. Damn, I muttered softly. Ethan stepped beside me. What happened? I angled the flashlight upward. Corrosion had eaten through half the support links years ago. One hard pull would probably tear the entire chain free. Can it still open? He asked. Maybe halfway. Will halfway be enough? Before I could answer, the overhead lights flickered once inside the chamber. Then died completely. Total darkness swallowed us instantly. Ethan inhaled sharply beside me. I tightened my grip on the flashlight automatically until the beam returned in a shaky arc across the room. Battery warning blinking red. Perfect timing. Somewhere above us, thunder cracked loud enough to shake dust from the ceiling pipes. Then came another sound. Faint at first, but growing fast. Rushing water. Too much water. Ethan heard it too. Naomi. His voice dropped low. Serious now. Tell me that is not coming toward us. I turned the flashlight toward the west tunnel entrance. Dark water surged around the bend much faster than before. The south pressure line had shifted again. And this time the flood was moving directly toward us. Ethan looked at the failing chain release overhead. Then back at the approaching water. We do not have enough time. The floodwater hit the chamber floor 30 seconds later. Fast. Violent. Black water slammed around our legs hard enough to shove loose debris against the concrete walls. Ethan grabbed the rusted railing beside the release wheel while I steadied the flashlight beam with both hands. The battery warning blinked red again. Weak light. Weak timing. How high will it rise? He asked over the roar. Depends if we open the overflow. The snapped chain above us swayed wildly from the force of the rushing water. One hard pull might still trigger the emergency release. Or tear the entire mechanism apart. Neither option felt comforting. Ethan stared at the chain. Tell me what to do. Water climbed another inch around our knees. Cold enough to numb. The tunnel smelled stronger now. Salt. Oil. Wet concrete. Storm runoff carried everything ugly underground eventually. I handed Ethan the flashlight. Keep the beam steady. Then I stepped onto the lower support ledge beneath the release wheel. Slick metal. Bad footing. The old chain rattled overhead while floodwater surged harder through the tunnel entrance behind us. Ethan aimed the flashlight upward carefully. That thing looks ancient. Because it is. I reached for the hanging chain slowly. Corrosion flaked beneath my gloves immediately. Great. One good pull. Maybe two. Above us, thunder cracked so loud the chamber walls shook. The water responded instantly. Another surge blasted through the tunnel and slammed against my legs hard enough to nearly throw me sideways. Ethan moved fast. One hand caught my waist before I slipped from the ledge. Strong grip. Steady. His flashlight beam jerked wildly across the walls before settling again. For 1 second neither of us moved. Water roared around us. My hand braced against his shoulder automatically. Warm even through soaked fabric. Too close. Way too close for a flooded tunnel beneath a marina. Ethan looked at me differently suddenly. Not like HOA president. Not like investor. Just a tired man standing chest deep in a disaster beside a woman he could no longer dismiss. I stepped back first. Hold the light higher. His jaw flexed once. Then he obeyed without speaking. Good choice. I grabbed the chain with both hands and pulled hard. Metal screamed overhead. The release wheel shifted half an inch. Then stopped. Water exploded from a side pipe near the ceiling and sprayed freezing runoff across the chamber. Ethan shielded his face instinctively. Again, he shouted. I pulled harder. Pain shot through my shoulders instantly. The corroded links groaned under strain. Then came a loud snapping sound somewhere above us. My stomach dropped. One section of chain tore loose from the support track and whipped sideways against the wall. Sparks burst briefly. In the darkness. Ethan cursed under his breath. The wheel had moved slightly farther though. Enough to hear a change in water pressure deeper inside the system. Not enough. Not yet. The floodwater surged higher around our thighs now. Fast. Too fast. Ethan stepped beside the ledge and grabbed the remaining chain without hesitation. Together, he said. I looked at him once. Rainwater still dripped from his hair onto his face. Expensive watch gone. Coat ruined. Shoes soaked black with tunnel water. Yet somehow he looked more honest down here than he ever had upstairs at HOA meetings. Strange what survival stripped away. We pulled together. The chain shrieked violently overhead. The wheel jerked another quarter turn. Then suddenly a deep mechanical boom echoed through the chamber beneath our feet. The overflow gate finally opened. Water pressure shifted instantly. The rushing flood around us changed direction in one violent sweep and surged down the east release channel instead of toward the chamber. Ethan staggered sideways from the sudden current change. I grabbed his arm before he lost balance completely. The flashlight beam swung wildly across the ceiling before stabilizing again. Both of us breathing hard now. The water level stopped rising. Not falling yet. But stable. For the first time in nearly an hour, the system sounded less angry. Ethan leaned back against the wall beside me and laughed once under his breath. Short. Disbelieving. You actually saved this place. We are not finished yet. His expression softened slightly after that. Tired eyes. Quiet smile. Dangerous combination. Then the flashlight beam caught movement near the tunnel entrance behind us. Someone else stood there in the dark. And they were not alone. The figure at the tunnel entrance stepped forward slowly through the rushing water. Flashlight beams cut across the concrete walls from behind him. County uniforms. 2 emergency workers. And Vanessa Hale in a cream raincoat that looked wildly out of place underground. She stopped the second she saw Ethan standing beside me in knee-deep floodwater. Really saw him. Soaked clothes. Mud on his sleeves. One hand still gripping the rusted release chain. Her expression hardened instantly. Ethan. His quiet laugh disappeared immediately. The distance returned to his face like a door closing. What are you doing down here? Vanessa asked sharply. Trying to prevent your contractors from destroying the marina. Her jaw tightened. One of the county workers moved past her carefully and inspected the overflow wheel. Pressure levels are stabilizing, he announced toward the others. Good. The word echoed strangely through the tunnel. Nobody sounded relieved enough yet. Vanessa stepped closer through the water. Expensive heels were not designed for flooded infrastructure tunnels. She nearly slipped once before catching herself against the wall. Ethan noticed. So did I. Neither of us offered help. Interesting. County inspectors are reviewing the excavation permits upstairs, she said tightly. This entire project may get suspended. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. It should be. That landed hard. Vanessa blinked once. Like she genuinely had not expected resistance from him. Not public resistance anyway. Her eyes shifted toward me next. Cold. Familiar. And I assume she convinced you of that? Ethan answered before I could. The damaged bracket convinced me. Silence spread through the tunnel instantly. Even the emergency workers stopped moving for half a second. Vanessa recovered fast though. People like her always did. Ethan, this is not the place for accusations. Then perhaps your contractors should not have damaged protected infrastructure. Her expression sharpened dangerously after that. You are choosing a marina operator over your own board. The words hung ugly in the damp air between us. Marina operator. Not Naomi. Not the person who just prevented a catastrophic flood failure beneath millions of dollars in waterfront property. Ethan looked tired again suddenly. Bone tired. She saved this system tonight, he said quietly. Where were you? Vanessa opened her mouth. Closed it. The county worker near the valve cleared his throat awkwardly and started documenting damage photos instead. Smart choice. Nobody wanted to stand inside whatever this conversation was becoming. Water slowly drained lower around our boots now that the overflow gate held stable. Good sign. Finally. I moved toward the wall ladder beside the east tunnel exit. The system still needs monitoring, I said. The south line could spike again if the tide shifts. Ethan nodded immediately. Vanessa noticed that too. The way he listened to me now without argument. Without dismissal. Her eyes narrowed almost invisibly. Tiny thing. But I caught it. So did Ethan. Naomi, the county worker, called gently. Do you have maintenance records for these tunnels? Every year since 1998. Vanessa cut in instantly. Those records are HOA property. I stopped halfway up the ladder and looked back at her. Actually, they belong to my father's operating contract. Her expression froze for one dangerous second. Ethan looked toward me sharply after that. He did not know. Good. Most HOA board members conveniently ignored the fact that my father negotiated permanent operational rights decades ago after rebuilding the flood system following Hurricane Gloria. Vanessa knew though. Of course she knew. Which meant tonight's demolition notice was never just about redevelopment. Ethan climbed the first ladder rung behind me slowly. You never mentioned a permanent contract. Nobody ever asked. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling pipes between us. Somewhere above ground, another siren wailed faintly across the marina. Emergency crews still moving. Storm still active. But something underground had shifted tonight beyond the flood system itself. Ethan was finally seeing the machinery behind Whitmore Point. And he did not like what it revealed. Vanessa remained standing in the flooded chamber below us. Pale coat soaked at the hem now. Perfect posture still intact somehow. This conversation is not finished, she said coldly. Ethan paused on the ladder long enough to look back down at her. No, he answered quietly. I do not think it is. Then the marina lights above us suddenly went dark again. Darkness rolled across the tunnel again like a curtain dropping over a stage. Somebody above ground shouted through the ventilation shaft. Then backup generators kicked in somewhere beneath the marina with a low mechanical rumble. Emergency lights flickered on 2 seconds later. Dim amber strips along the tunnel walls. Weak but enough to move. Ethan climbed the rest of the ladder beside me while water dripped steadily from both our clothes. The air near the upper hatch felt colder now. Wind from the storm pushed rain sideways across the marina entrance overhead. When we stepped outside, the entire lower parking lot sat under nearly a foot of water. Emergency trucks flashed red and blue against the rain. County workers moved between barricades carrying equipment cases and portable pumps. Nobody looked calm. Good. They finally understood how serious this was. Ethan stopped beside the hatch entrance and looked across the marina. Half the dock lights remained dark. Water crashed violently against the seawall under the force of the rising tide. Somewhere farther down the shoreline, a boat horn blared once through the storm. Long uneasy. Frank hurried toward us through the floodwater with a stack of soaked folders held under his jacket. These are the maintenance records, he said breathlessly. I grabbed everything before the county team locked the office. I took the folders immediately. The paper smelled like mildew and old ink. Decades of ignored warnings sat inside my hands. Ethan glanced toward the documents carefully. How bad is it? Frank answered before I could. Depends how honest everybody wants to be tonight. Ethan almost smiled at that. Almost. Vanessa emerged from the tunnel hatch several feet behind us, furious and soaked through despite the expensive raincoat. 2 lawyers followed close behind carrying tablets inside waterproof sleeves. Even now they looked more worried about paperwork than flood levels. Typical. Those records belong to the HOA, Vanessa snapped immediately. Frank looked at me first before answering her. Good man. Operational copies remain under Marina control, he said carefully. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You are obstructing an active county review. Ethan finally stepped between us before I could answer. Not aggressively. Just enough. No, he said calmly. We are preserving evidence. The silence after that felt electric. Rain hammered the marina roof above us while emergency lights painted everyone in shifting red and gold. Vanessa stared at Ethan like she no longer recognized him. Honestly, maybe she did not. County Inspector Raymond Cole approached through ankle-deep water carrying a flashlight and clipboard. Mid-60s. Gray beard. Exhausted eyes. The kind of man who had spent decades cleaning up expensive mistakes made by people with expensive lawyers. He stopped directly in front of me. You Naomi Carter? Yes. He nodded toward the soaked folders in my arms. I want every maintenance request your office filed regarding the South Line. Vanessa stepped forward instantly. Inspector, we should review those documents through legal channels first. Cole ignored her completely. Smartest decision anyone made all night. Miss Carter. I handed him the top folder. Water dripped steadily from the cardboard edges. Cole opened it beneath his flashlight beam and scanned the first page silently. Then the second. His jaw tightened. Ethan watched the inspector's expression carefully beside me. What is it? Cole held up a water-stained repair request dated 8 years earlier. Recommended immediate replacement of south retaining supports. Request denied, HOA development priorities. Signed beneath it in neat black ink sat Vanessa Hale's name. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Rain struck the marina roof hard enough to sound like gravel. Vanessa recovered first. Of course she did. That recommendation was preliminary. Cole flipped to the next page. Another denied repair request. Then another. Same signatures. Same ignored warnings. Ethan looked at Vanessa slowly. No anger yet. Worse. Disappointment. Deep enough to hollow out his voice when he finally spoke. You knew the line was unstable. Vanessa lifted her chin carefully. The expansion project required budget adjustments. Ethan laughed softly under his breath. Cold sound. Tired sound. People could have lost their homes tonight. Nothing happened. That sentence landed harder than thunder. Even the county workers nearby stopped moving for a second. Ethan stared at her in complete silence. Then he looked toward the flooded marina around us. Emergency crews. Broken dock lights. Water surging against the seawall. All of it real. All of it avoidable. His face changed after that. Quietly. Permanently. Then Inspector Cole opened the final folder. Inspector Cole opened the final folder carefully because the cardboard edges were already splitting from the rain. Water dripped from the marina roof in slow steady lines around us. Emergency lights flashed across flooded pavement. Nobody spoke. Even Vanessa stayed silent for once. Cole pulled out a thin sealed envelope from inside the back cover. Yellow paper. Old county stamp. My stomach tightened immediately. I knew that envelope. My father kept a copy locked inside the pump house safe for years. Cole looked at the faded label beneath his flashlight. Permanent Operational Easement, Carter Marina Flood Control Authority. Ethan glanced toward me slowly. Ease me through this, he said quietly. Cole opened the document and scanned the pages beneath the rain-speckled light. According to this, he said carefully, the Carter family retained independent authority over all flood control systems servicing Whitmore Point after the 1985 Reconstruction Agreement. Vanessa stepped forward instantly. That agreement became obsolete after the HOA incorporation. Cole shook his head once. Not unless formally dissolved through county review. He lifted another page. And there is no record that ever happened. The storm wind pushed Rain sideways across the marina lot again. Somewhere farther down the docks, generators hummed unevenly against the tide. Ethan looked at me with a completely different expression now. Not curiosity. Not attraction. Respect. Quiet. Heavy. Dangerous in its own way. You knew this whole time, he said. It was never a secret. Vanessa laughed sharply under her breath. Please. Her father barely kept this place running. The sentence hit colder than the rain. Frank looked away immediately. He remembered my father working 16-hour shifts during hurricane season while board members complained about marina aesthetics. I remembered too. Ethan did not answer Vanessa right away. He studied the flooded parking lot instead. The emergency pumps. The county crews. The seawall barely holding under the tide pressure. Then his eyes settled on the old pump house at the far end of the marina. Small building. Rusted roof. Still standing. Still working. Your father built the system that protects every property here, he said quietly. Yes. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. That does not excuse unauthorized operational control. Ethan finally turned toward her fully. Unauthorized? His voice stayed calm. Somehow that made it worse. You signed demolition orders for protected infrastructure while ignoring nearly a decade of repair warnings. Vanessa opened her mouth again, but Ethan cut her off before she could start. And tonight your contractors nearly collapsed the south line. Silence spread hard across the flooded marina. Inspector Cole closed the folder slowly. Nearby county workers pretended not to listen while obviously listening to every word. Vanessa stared at Ethan in disbelief now. Like she genuinely expected him to protect her anyway. Wealthy communities survived on that assumption. Private mistakes. Quiet settlements. Smiling photographs afterward. Ethan looked exhausted by all of it suddenly. Suspend the expansion project, he told Cole. Vanessa inhaled sharply. Ethan. Immediately. Rain rolled down his face while emergency lights flashed red across the water behind him. And open a full investigation into the contractor damage. Nobody moved for half a second. Then Cole nodded once. Understood. Vanessa's composure cracked after that. Barely. But enough. Do you have any idea what this will cost? Ethan looked at the flooded marina around us again before answering. Apparently not enough. The wind shifted colder across the seawall. I tightened my grip on the soaked folders against my chest. Water still pooled around our boots, but the levels had finally stopped climbing. The marina would survive the night now. Barely. Ethan stepped toward me quietly while county crews moved around us in the rain. His voice lowered enough that only I heard it. Why did you never use the contract against them before? I looked toward the old pump house glowing dimly. Beneath emergency lights. Because protecting people mattered more than winning. Something moved behind his eyes after that. Deep enough to hurt. Then his phone vibrated again. And this time his face went completely still. Ethan stared at the glowing phone screen without moving. Rain slid down the side of his face in thin silver lines beneath the emergency lights. Around us, county crews kept working through the flooded marina. Pumps hummed. Radios crackled. Somebody shouted measurements near the seawall. But Ethan looked strangely far away for a second. What happened? I asked quietly. He swallowed once before answering. The board called an emergency vote. Vanessa stiffened several feet away. Ethan looked directly at her now. They removed you as acting vice president. Even the rain seemed quieter after that. Vanessa blinked hard like the words physically hit her. You cannot be serious. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. The county inspector copied the board on the damage report. Vanessa laughed once under her breath. Bitter. Sharp. So this is what tonight becomes. Ethan did not answer immediately. His eyes drifted toward the flooded docks again instead. Toward the emergency crews trying to save infrastructure the HOA ignored for years. Tonight became something else a long time ago. That landed deeper than he intended. I could hear it in his voice. So could Vanessa. Her posture changed after that. Not softer. Harder. Defensive. You are throwing away $1 billion redevelopment project because of one storm. Ethan finally looked back at her. No, calm again. Cold again. I am ending it because I finally looked underneath it. Silence stretched between them. Raw. Heavy. The kind of silence wealthy people usually buried under lawyers and cocktails before it could grow teeth. Inspector Cole approached again carrying updated flood readings clipped to a waterproof board. Pressure levels are stabilizing across all lower channels, he announced. If the tide drops another 6 inches before dawn, the marina should hold. Good. Finally good. My shoulders loosened for the first time all night. Ethan noticed immediately. Tiny thing. But his expression softened almost without permission. Dangerous again. Vanessa saw that too. Of course she did. Unbelievable, she muttered quietly. Then she walked away through the floodwater toward the county vehicles without another word. Nobody stopped her. Frank exhaled loudly beside me after she disappeared into the rain. That woman scared me for 15 years. Ethan almost smiled at that. She scared most people. Not Naomi. Frank looked at me with tired admiration before heading back toward the emergency pump crews. I hated attention like that. Especially from people who knew my father. Ethan remained beside me in the rain after everyone else drifted away. The marina looked different now beneath the emergency lights. Less polished. More honest. Floodwater reflected broken dock lights in long trembling streaks across the pavement. The old pump house still stood at the far end like it always had. Small. Rusted. Necessary. Ethan shoved one wet hand through his hair slowly. You should not have had to fight this hard just to protect your own system. People only notice infrastructure when it fails. I noticed you. The sentence arrived quietly. No performance behind it. No flirtation. Somehow that made it more dangerous than anything else he said tonight. I looked away first toward the dark water rolling against the seawall. Wind carried the sharp smell of salt and storm runoff across the marina. You noticed me after your property flooded. He laughed softly under his breath. Tired sound again. Fair point. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. The storm had weakened slightly now. Rain still fell, but softer. Slower. Somewhere farther down the docks, generators finally powered several marina lights back on. Warm gold reflection spread across the water between us. Ethan stepped closer then stopped himself halfway. I felt the hesitation physically. Like he almost reached for something invisible and changed his mind at the last second. Good. Some boundaries mattered more when people were exhausted and honest. Naomi, he said quietly. About earlier tonight. I already knew what he meant. The pump house. His hand around my wrist. The way loneliness sounded in his voice before the storm stripped everything else away. I tightened my grip on the soaked folders against my chest. Do not, I said softly. Ethan nodded once immediately. Respecting the line even while standing painfully close to it. Then his eyes shifted past me toward the old marina office. Someone had turned on the upstairs lights. The upstairs office windows glowed pale gold against the storm-dark marina. Warm light spilled across the rain-slick balcony outside the old building. Somebody moved behind the curtains briefly. Probably county staff organizing reports and damage maps before dawn. The crisis was finally slowing down enough for paperwork to begin. Somehow that felt stranger than the flood itself. Ethan followed my gaze toward the office windows. "You should get dry," he said quietly. "You too." He looked down at himself for the first time in hours. Mud on his sleeves. Rust stains across his cuffs. Water dripping steadily from the hem of his ruined coat. A tired laugh escaped him. "My tailor is going to have a breakdown." I almost smiled. Almost. The marina air felt different now. Less sharp. The rain had softened into a cold steady mist rolling off the bay. Emergency crews still moved across the docks, but slower now. More controlled. The danger had passed its peak. Ethan walked with me toward the old pump house in silence. Floodwater splashed softly beneath our boots. Somewhere behind us, generators hummed against the fading storm. The pump house door creaked when I pushed it open. Same smell waiting inside. Rust. Coffee grounds. Damp paper. Home, in its own strange way. I set the soaked maintenance folders carefully on the worktable beside the control panel. The old system lights blinked steadily across the wall now. Stable. Finally stable. Ethan stood near the doorway for a second before stepping fully inside. He looked around slowly. At the worn shelves. The old radio equipment. My father's handwritten notes taped beside the pressure gauges. Nothing expensive. Nothing polished. Yet somehow the room carried more honesty than half the houses sitting above the marina. "Your father built all this?" he asked quietly. "Most of it." I peeled off my wet gloves and hung them near the heater vent. My hands still shook slightly from the cold and adrenaline. Ethan noticed immediately. He always noticed small things now. Dangerous habit. He crossed toward the old coffee machine beside the sink. "Does this thing still work?" "Usually." A few minutes later the machine sputtered awake with a tired grinding sound. Ethan looked genuinely relieved over something as simple as coffee. Strange night. Strange man. Steam slowly filled the small room while rain tapped softly against the pump house windows. Neither of us spoke for a while. We did not need to. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Just tired. Honest. Ethan handed me a chipped coffee mug with faded marina lettering around the rim. Our fingers brushed briefly again. Warm this time. The heater had finally kicked on. "Thank you," I said softly. He leaned one shoulder against the control panel beside me. Close enough to feel his warmth. Far enough to respect the line I drew earlier. Good. Outside, emergency lights reflected faintly across the wet marina roads. The storm clouds were finally breaking apart over the bay. Dawn waited somewhere behind them. Ethan stared quietly at the blinking flood controls across the wall. "I spent years trying to modernize this place," he admitted. "And I never once understood what actually kept it alive." I wrapped both hands around the hot coffee mug. "Most people do not notice foundations until they crack." He nodded slowly after that. His eyes stayed on the control panel lights. Then he looked at me with the same quiet expression from the tunnel earlier. Softer now though. Less lonely. "I was wrong about you," he said. "No," I shook my head gently. "You just finally looked long enough." The room went still after that. Heater humming softly. Rain easing outside. Old machinery ticking through another safe pressure cycle beneath our feet. Ethan smiled then. Small. Real. Not the polished smile from HOA meetings or investor dinners. Just relief. Just gratitude. Dawn light slowly touched the marina windows behind us in pale silver lines. The worst of the storm had passed. And for the first time all night, Whitmore Point finally sounded calm.